Chapter 9. Natural Law Theory. The Doctrine of Double Effect. The objectives for this video begin by identifying a possible conflict with natural law theory. Then we're going to learn about the doctrine of double effect as a solution to this conflict. Next, we'll present and explain 4 conditions for the doctrine of double effect. And finally, consider 2 examples showing the application of the doctrine of double effect so that we know how to apply the doctrine. Inevitably, there are situations where an act produces both good and bad effects. These situations pose a dilemma when natural value can only be supported at the expense of another natural value. To determine what should be done in these situations, natural law theorists have developed the doctrine of double effect. This is the doctrine of double effect, and it states that when an act will lead to both good and bad effect, it's permissible to perform that act only if all 4 of the following conditions are satisfied: the moral principle condition, the means-end condition, the right intention condition, and the proportionality condition. Now I'm going to expand on each of these conditions. First, the moral principle condition. The moral principle condition states that the act cannot violate a moral principle because this would make the act wrong. Here are some examples of acts that violate a moral principle. Killing an innocent person on purpose, even if that killing could save other people, is an example of an action that violates a moral principle. Lying violates a moral principle, and breaking promises also violates a moral principle. There are acts that satisfy this condition, of course, including things like administering a medicine or carrying out an operation. So you'll notice that in administering a medicine does not violate a moral principle, and similarly, carrying out an operation also doesn't violate a moral principle. So if administering a medicine ends up hurting someone, this is okay according to this moral theory, as long as it meets the other 3 conditions. The means-end condition. The means-end condition says that the bad effect cannot itself be the means for achieving the good effect. So, effects can relate to each other in various ways. In the case where a good effect is dependent on a bad effect, this violates the means-end condition. The right intention condition. The right intention condition says that one must intend only the good effect and not the bad effect. Even if the bad effect is foreseen and expected, it must not be intended. An action can still have a bad effect that's foreseen and expected as long as the person performing the act does not intend for the bad effect to take place. The proportionality condition. The proportionality condition says the good effect must be at least as great as the bad effect. So here's some examples of how we might measure this. If the good effect is that a life is saved, and the bad effect is that a life is lost, then the good and the bad effect are equal, and this condition is satisfied. If, however, the good effect is to obtain $1 million, while the bad effect is that 10 people will die, then the good effect is not as great as the bad effect. So here are some requirements for application. In order to apply the 4 conditions required by the doctrine of double effect, we need to clearly distinguish between 3 things. We need to distinguish between an act, the intention of the person performing the act, and the 2 effects that the act causes. There can also be more effects, but for these examples, we're just going to focus on 2. Okay. The moral principle condition applies only to the act. The right intention condition applies only to the intention of the person performing the act, while the means-end condition and the proportionality condition apply to the effects the act causes. Okay, now we're going to go through a couple of examples to see how you apply the doctrine of double effect. A pregnant mother discovers that she has cancer and needs to have a hysterectomy immediately before the cancer spreads. Her fetus will not survive the procedure. The good effect is that the mother lives, and the bad effect is that the fetus dies. Is the act permitted? Well, if we look at condition 1, we see that it's met because the act of removing a diseased uterus violates no moral principles and so is not bad in itself. Condition 2 is also met. The bad effect, in this case, the death of the fetus, is not the means used to achieve the good effect, in this case, the mother surviving. The death of the fetus does not save the life of the mother. Instead, her life is saved by the removal of her uterus, which has the death of the fetus as a side effect. In this case, the effects are independent of each other. Condition 3 is met as long as the doctor's only intention is to save the mother's life, not to abort the fetus. And condition 4 is also met because the good effect is at least as great as the bad effect. While it costs one life, it saves another. So, therefore, according to the doctrine of double effect, the act is morally permissible. Here's another example. A terrorist has hidden a nuclear bomb in Los Angeles. He's captured, but refuses to reveal where the bomb is hidden and will die rather than reveal this information. The interrogator, therefore, threatens to kill the terrorist's son. The interrogator has not yet killed the child, but wonders whether doing this is morally permissible. The act in question is shooting the child. The bad effect is the child's death, and the good effect is finding the bomb and saving millions of innocent lives. So, in this case, condition 1 is not met because the act being contemplated violates the principle that prohibits killing an innocent person, which is morally wrong. Condition 2 is also not met because the child's death is the very means used to obtain the desired information from the terrorist. If the child isn't killed, the terrorist won't give the information. The latter depends upon the former. Condition 3 is also not met because the agent intends the child's death. He also intends to save the innocent millions, of course, but he intends to do both of these things. Another way to put this is that the agent doesn't kill the child accidentally. The child dies as a result of the agent's deliberate choice, and a deliberate choice is always intended. Condition 4 is satisfied because the good effect, saving many lives, is much greater than the bad effect, the death of one child. So, although condition 4 is overwhelmingly met, the act is not morally permissible since all 4 conditions must be satisfied for an act to be morally permissible. And as we saw, 3 of the conditions are not met. Okay, let's review. So, you should be able to answer these questions. What is the problem with natural law theory that led to the need for the doctrine of double effect? What's the doctrine of double effect, and how does it help relieve this problem? Explain the 4 conditions for the doctrine of double effect. Can you apply the doctrine of double effect to a moral dilemma?